Whenever we talk about colonial India, it's always the English that comes to our mind. Yet, they weren't the first European nation to rule India. It was the Portuguese who first set foot in India to establish trading centers in the country. Later on, with the help of their governors, they were able to establish the Portuguese government. However, the Portuguese rule in India is often sidelined. But the Estado Português da India, or the state of Portuguese India, was a significant part of our Indian history. Within 50 years of Vasco da Gama's arrival in Calicut, several coastal areas of the Indian mainland came under the Portuguese rule. Goa and its surrounding coast, up to the 60 miles, were under the Portuguese occupation. On the western coast of India, the Portuguese controlled the area that extended from Chaul, Mumbai to Daman and Diu. In southern India, they were in a control of a slew of seaport forts and trading posts like Mangalore, Cannanore, Kochi, Calicut, Karanganore, and Ceylon. Although their power in Malabar was scattered, it was enough to hold power over local rulers in possession of the spice-growing lands. They also were in control of some military posts and settlements on the eastern coast, like that of St. Thome in modern-day Chennai and Nagapattinam, both in modern-day Tamil Nadu. And by the end of the 16th century, they were able to establish a settlement in Hooghly, modern-day West Bengal, as well. The Portuguese not only established the settlements, but also involved themselves in diplomatic activities. Diplomats and ambassadors were often exchanged between Goa, the seat of Portuguese power in India, and some of the major kingdoms of that time. Treaties were also signed, and one such treaty was signed between Goa and the Deccan Sultans in 1571. These treaties were renewed as long as the kingdoms lasted. They also intervened in local politics. For example, they played a significant role in the battles between the Vijayanagar Empire and Deccan Sultanates, the Deccan Sultanates and the Mughals, and between the Mughals and the Marathas. While the Portuguese motive was primarily commercial when they came to India, it soon transformed into a thirst for greater power in the Indian Ocean. And to become the master of the sea, they conquered places, constructed forts, etc. But these newly established settlements and trading posts required governance. And to govern these places, they established an administrative system. So, how did the Portuguese administrative system work? Let's take a look. The Portuguese administrative system was hierarchical in nature, and instructions flowed from top to bottom. On top, there was a viceroy who was seated at Goa. He was the head of the Portuguese administration as well as that of the civil and military government of the whole Portuguese overseas empire. The said empire stretched from East Africa to Moluccas and Macau. He served for 3 years and was only accountable to the Portuguese crown. The viceroy was assisted by a secretary and in the subsequent years by a council. The council was composed of several members such as the Archbishop of Goa, the Chief Inquisitor, some noble residents of Goa, also known as the Fidalgos, captain of the city of Goa, the chief judge of the High Court, and the chief financial officer. Goa also had a municipal council. Other Portuguese settlements and subordinate forts also followed a similar form of governance. The second from the top was the Vedder da Fazenda. He was responsible for the revenues and cargoes and the dispatch of the fleets. The Portuguese forts and fortresses from Africa to China were under the rule of the captains. The captains were assisted by factors. The forts and the captains played a significant role in securing the commercial monopoly of the spice trade with Europe. They also helped to monopolize the trade between various ports within Asia by taxing them and controlling the flow of trade in the Indian Ocean. The power of the captains often increased due to the lack of communication with the higher-ups, and this was misused for meeting the personal ends. The Portuguese had two main motivations for exploring the East. They wanted to take control of the trade by defeating Muslims and propagating Christianity. The Portuguese were the enemies of the Moors and also of the Arabs. Especially intolerant of the Muslims, the Portuguese were initially tolerant of the Hindus, but this tolerance did not last long. After the establishment of the Inquisition in Goa in 1560 by Sir Francis Xavier, the Hindus were also persecuted. One would think that such behavior of the Jesuits would be condemned by the Mughal Emperor Akbar, a very tolerant ruler. But that was not the case. Akbar, inspired by his interest in theology, invited the Jesuits to his court. In September 1579, Akbar extended an official invitation to the authorities at Goa, requesting them to send 2 priests to his court. The Portuguese eagerly accepted the formal invitation as they saw this as a chance to convert the Mughal emperor to Christianity and with him his court and people. Jesuit fathers Rodolfo Acquaviva and Antonio Monserrate were picked up for the purpose. Upon reaching Fatehpur Sikri on February 28, 1580, they were welcomed honorably. Akbar allowed the Jesuit priests to practice, preach, and convert freely in the city. The missionaries also enjoyed unlimited access to the emperor and could freely participate in debates on religions held at the Ibadat Khana. Such religious freedom may have created an impression that Emperor Akbar decided to convert to Christianity, but that wasn't the case. Emperor Akbar was in search of the spiritual truth. He was innately tolerant and had a syncretic way of thinking. Unsuccessful in their endeavor to convert the emperor and his court, Monserrate and Acquaviva concluded their trip in 1583. Akbar invited a second mission in 1590, and the mission reached him in 1591. Due to the resistance from influential court members, it had to be ended soon. In 1595, when the Mughal court was residing in Lahore, Akbar invited the Portuguese Christian missionaries for the 3rd time. Fathers Emmanuel Piheiro and Jerome Xavier were the leaders of this mission. They became sort of permanent at Akbar's court, extending their influence over his secular politics. Their letters from the court of Akbar also provided great insight into the later years of his reign. However, when Prince Salim ascended the throne as Jahangir in 1605, he did not extend the same warmth as his father to the Jesuit missionaries. Instead, he appeased the Muslims by forsaking them. However, this estrangement did not last for long. In 1606, favors to the Jesuits were extended once again. The Jesuits were allowed to retain the church at Lahore along with the collegium or the priest's residence as a part of the favor. Moreover, in 1608, 20 baptisms were carried out in Agra by Christian priests. The priests in the Mughal court enjoyed the same public liberty as they had in Portugal. Jahangir's conduct with the Jesuits was so impeccable that they became too hopeful of converting him into Christianity. Those hopes obviously never came to fruition. On top of that, the arrogant behavior of the Portuguese viceroys led to a fallout with the Mughal emperor. How did that happen? We'll discuss it some other time.